Hi, welcome to T³U² Theory by Papenfus. The impossible hole. What is the impossible hole about? Let's see. The impossible hole states that the neutron is nothing else but a gap in the lattice. The T3 theory has indisputable proof already that the electrons simply don't exist. That electromagnetic waves do not have any physical particle component, that electricity is the discharging of the dielectric component of the electromagnetic field back into the inertia plane, and that an apparent observation of what we call matter is in simple terms actually space, as opposed to counter space, and therefore just a byproduct of magnetism. Nothing, including time, neither space, matter, or actually anything else for that matter, what a tongue twist, can exist without motion. All indicators in the theory points to the non-presence of what the world wants so desperately to believe in, namely that both protons and neutrons actually exist as a type of physical particle, which we, for example, can cut in half and then have two separate entities. Obviously, we understand protons is one of the smallest things according to general theory and not splittable, but that's to try and describe the physical ideas which are in people's heads. The next quest in the T³U² theory before final publication is therefore to prove the point above, which may then even lead to the redefinition of the proton itself. So we are saying the neutron is nothing else but a gap in the lattice. What does that mean? Mother Nature has a tendency to design perfectly, and we base our presumption on observation and the most likely probability. Well, time for quantum mechanics to have a use finally, until proven otherwise. As the author, that's me, after comprehensive theory, I'm simply too tied up with other developments and research to tackle all the outstanding items, and therefore please ask scientists. Whatever you may believe otherwise is also okay. Just to do calculus and add their knowledge to whatever seems further proof or validation of the following concepts. Please bear in mind that the publication date of this document serves as proof as to the origin of the statement. However, I am willing to add meaningful contributors as co-discoverers. Or alternatively, just feel free to steal and run the idea if you do not think I deserve the credit for your mind spark, as long as the answers surface quickly, so that it can point mankind to the truth. The perfect design. If we are the designers of a new system, and we start with the presumption that we want to fill up a box with balls of a fixed unity size, and obtain the maximum mass as output, it will obviously lead us to the smallest balls possible to manufacture. However, we have a paradigm of constraints in terms of size to the smallest unity particle. We know, namely, the new proton we are designing, which in fact is also the smallest magnet or a generator possible. However, we have a couple of additional constraints which forces us to first design on the macroscopic level and then to progress to the final solution. The idea of this exercise is to see how close we can get by obviously using the proposed methodology to the current predicted volume of a proton compared to the measurable. Since the T³U² theory proved that electrons is the figment of previous generations' imaginations, we are actually trying to determine the volume of influence of the second level boundary layer, which a T³U² proton will exert in terms of its magnetic radiation. So what we are saying here is that we have some ideas about protons which does not necessarily reflect in current descriptions of protons. We understand in these T³U², that a singular magnetic field will have a weaker radiation exerting pressure far exceeding its second level boundary. In other words, magnetism will travel quite far, even in a lattice or outside of the lattice as we experience it, but it will have little real effect in terms of bonding. So consequently that what we call, you can almost say, it's distributed or loose, not consequential magnetism, affecting its occupancy of space, and therefore it will affect the observable mass perception, but it's not the real mass that we are looking for. A neighboring proton, however, cannot compress the second level radiation without severe consequences to the lattice and will cause an unbalanced system. And we are obviously just interested in studying the balanced lattice currently, so this is kind of the range where we are looking to try and find answers for. We need this calculus to verify binding forces and lots of other information to actually put the proton itself to dust rest finally, now or then eventually, but definitely somewhere in the future. Okay, first to start and just give a basic idea of what it's all about is we start in the second dimension explanation for purposes for people to just get a better idea of where we're heading to. T³U² Theory Law 6 states, space will always try to balance itself by contraction due to the counter-mirrored equal pressure which will be exerted by counter space should some space be removed from the lattice. Okay, what does that mean? Have a look at the picture on the right and start familiarizing yourself. In this second dimension example system, obviously ignore the box. Unfortunately, I didn't have a proper drawing program, so I had to draw a three-dimensional box, but just presume that is a two-dimensional box. Space is defined as the area inside that box. Outside of the box is nothing, or what is then referred to as counter space. It means that should the center ball be removed, as indicated, it will create the impossible hole requirement perfectly because of the kissing number design of 6 balls touching the center ball. It should now be clear that if the balls is actually protons, or the influence spheres of protons, this removed area can never be filled simply due to the lattice constraints. All of those 6 balls will try and fill that empty position, but they cannot because they are already locked into each other. 6 root vectors of radiation force equal to 1/6 the space each now constantly acts upon that impossible hole. Since the system receives induced stress from counter space, neutrons constitutes a low pressure region in the lattice. And if we look at the rest of the lattice, we can obviously try, or we can fit in some more protons there, but they all don't have an effect on the area that we are speaking strictly in. It's only your boundary which will have an influence, since the force will be exerted on the boundary, and that boundary force will then obviously be induced to the center. Okay, so what we say here, that this is the definition of a neutron according to the T³U² theory, and resolves lots of reasons as to why protons are neutral, yet have such strong bonding properties. The measured mass of a proton should therefore correlate with the reflected mass components of the root vectors. Okay, so let's move to the actual real thing which we want resolved, the third dimension neutron. In 3 dimensions the kissing number is 12, but the correct value was much more difficult to establish than dimensions 1 and 2. It's easy to arrange 12 spheres so that each touches a central sphere. Sorry, I'm not English speaking, it's my third language. But there is a lot of space left over, and it's not obvious that there is no way to pack in a 13th sphere. In fact, there is so much extra space that any two of the 12 outer spheres can exchange places through a continuous movement without any of the other spheres losing contact with the center one. This was the subject of a famous disagreement between mathematicians Isaac Newton and David Gregory. Newton correctly thought that the limit was 12, Gregory thought that the 13 could fit. Some incomplete proofs that Newton was correct were offered in the 19th century, but the first correct proof, according to Brass, Moser and Pach, did not appear until 1953. The 12 neighbors of the central sphere correspond to the maximum bulk coordination number of an atom in a crystal lattice, in which all atoms have the same size as in a chemical element. A coordination number of 12 is found in a cubic close pack or a hexagonal close pack structure. A nice way to obtain this arrangement on the next page is by aligning the centers of outer spheres with the vertices of an icosahedron. This would leave just a bit more than 0.1 of the radius between two nearby spheres. This is exactly the requirement for free migration of proton flow around a neutron and corresponds to the frictional kinetic velocity absorption properties, unless of course you can prove us otherwise, and you're more than welcome. We are always open for change and for new ideas. But basically, we are fairly certain that nature would have selected something in the line of what we propose here. Basic calculus as a starting point you can obviously find in Wikipedia, or contact me if you're really interested in solving it, and I will give you some starting guides and starting points. But basically the exercise is exactly that, is to confirm current work also against other ideas and opinions and work. We cannot afford to make a small mistake, print it, and then later discover that it hasn't been verified properly. Thank you very much for that part. Let's move on. And here it is. The neutron caught inside an impossible hole. So what is that red ball in the middle? That red ball in the middle is actually, in our old ideas of space or whatever, would be nothing, would be empty space inside of space. Remember that the new theory has proven that space cannot exist apart from where a magnetic radiation exists or where movement exists. So basically what happened here is by obviously a process that required a lot of energy, by removal of a single, let's call it in an old terms, proton, we create a hole in the lattice where the rest of the protons surrounding it by natural flow as well as pressure, the pressure components. Basically the new theory is much more of a flow dynamics type of observations, as opposed to old Newtonian or even atomic or relativity theory concepts. It's basically all about pressures and resolving of pressures, and that is what it is. So inside of this closely packed, let's call it still protons, now exist a hole in space which they would try and fill, and that is exactly what a proton is. A proton has got no what we can call a charge, or it's neutral in terms of everything else, yet it seems to be a very strong bonding force. Exactly what this impossible hole is doing. So there is no need for a particle or a physical component of what we perceive as mass in previous, I can almost say, previous thought lines, which hasn't been well thought out. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to anybody who can give me some feedback and results, in correlations or disputes or resolutions or whatever you feel in terms of that. And thank you for listening at least to me. I appreciate if you give me feedback. Thank you.